Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Moren Madness podcast, all about Indiana women's basketball, presented by the Hoosier Network. I'm your host, Abby Haymond, joined today by Kevin, Vera, and Talia Goodman. How's it going, guys?
What's up?
Yeah, doing pretty good.
Good, thanks. Thanks for coming on. First, we have a big game this week, but first let's talk a little bit about the season so far. So what is one positive thing you guys have seen and something you'd like to see a little bit more improvement on as we dig deeper into the season?
So for me, it is all about freshman Yarden Garzon. She was not necessarily a surprise for the coaching staff, but maybe more so for the fans, seeing her really step into this big role so quickly. She really performed in Vegas, which we're going to talk about later, really stepped up into that spot that she needs to be in after Berger got hurt, which we'll also talk about. But yeah, this whole season, she's just been really impressive to me. She's averaging 13 points per game. She has 53% three-point shooting right now. That's crazy, especially
incredible
for a freshman, and that's not all she does. She's nearly 4 boards and 4 assists a game. She kind of does everything out there, and even when she's not shooting at her best, which we saw in a game like a week or so ago, she can help out on other areas on the court.
Yeah, absolutely. Kevin, what about you?
I mean, this team looks like a brand new team in comparison to last year. I mean, there's obviously a lot more depth. You had the handful of transfers that Indiana added in the offseason, so that kind of puts them in a new spot where they weren't last year. And, I mean, looking at the wins right now, I mean, as we're recording this, 7-0, their biggest win against Tennessee a couple weeks ago. But overall, they've looked pretty much well-rounded. You know, they've been able to shoot the ball well. Mackenzie Holmes obviously being the forefront down in the paint. And then Grace Berger up until, a couple days ago has been the main shooter and the main scorer for Indiana. But they've looked well. I mean, obviously the early season schedule isn't, it's what we've expected.
Yeah, you're right. Just solid all around. I think the Tennessee game really did highlight more of the strengths than we thought we would see. But, okay, what's one thing you guys want to see improvement on as we head a little deeper into the season, as I said?
Yeah, for me, and Terry Moren talked about this, it's the free throw shooting. There really should not be as much of an issue with it as there is, and maybe it's expected for players like Mackenzie Holmes who aren't known for their shooting, but it really is just something that they've been working on in practice, and she said they're getting better at, but I think we need to see it a little bit more on the court.
Absolutely, and that just rounds out the team as a whole if that's something they can nail down.
I would agree. I would also put out there just a little bit of rebounding.
Mm-hmm.
When it, and the one thing that this team kind of doesn't have is size. Besides Mackenzie and Alyssa Geary, it kind of gets a little. It's
Yeah, you're right.
It just doesn't feel like they have a big man presence when those two are not playing.
You're right.
We've seen Terry kind of run sometimes a little bit of a smaller lineup. Running with either 4 guards or 3 guards and then 2 wings, whatever the case might be. But when Mackenzie's not in, you can kind of tell, it's not just offensively, but also defensively, it kind of changes the whole momentum of the team. So, obviously, again, still early.
Not a lot you can do about that, though, but making up for it in other ways, definitely.
I think that's somewhere that Alyssa Geary really needs to step up into that role, and that's what Moren said even during the preseason, is that she expects her to really be a shot blocker. She expects her to get those boards, and, she's working on it, and you can see improvement, but I think that's somewhere where, she needs to fit more into the role that Moren expected her to.
Let me say this. I feel like, obviously we didn't do one in the preseason, but right now, I feel like she's the most interesting transfer.
I agree.
Just because she played every game last year at Providence.
Mm-hmm.
Big East, both men's and women's is a, very tough mid-major conference.
Yeah.
So she coming over as a grad transfer. She's the second man. She's the second person behind Mackenzie Holmes and that sort of 5 roles. So,
Yeah, she does. She plays an interesting position for the team, which, again, with all the other transfers and Yarden and the other freshmen, they have so much more depth, and the team is rounded out as a whole. So let's focus a little bit on last week. It was Thanksgiving for students, but this team traveled out west to Las Vegas for the Las Vegas Invitational, where the team was met with poor tournament conditions, not full medical staff. It was set up in a ballroom, just no stands. Talk to me about what Terry Moren and the team's response was to those conditions.
So I'll tell you what I saw.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm just, going by my day. And obviously we were, expecting this Auburn game. And so we check on Twitter, and Austin Render, the voice of the women's team, was the first one that I saw that tweeted out a photo about the courtroom. he didn't say anything about it. He just sent a photo that Indiana was playing Auburn in, whatever time it was. And then the photos and then the opinions started coming in. And it literally just seemed like if you walked into a simple, conference room.
Yeah, like there was no
just put a cord on the
space.
floor.
Exactly.
No space at all. And, I understand if maybe, because later afterwards, I saw a picture of what they were, it was proposed to be.
Yeah.
And, I get it if it's not, this same exact thing. But that's nowhere near what they were promised.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's the biggest thing for me. And, obviously, it's just weird on the players when you have to go through something like that. But also one of the questions that I had is if there was fans that wanted to go, where are they going to sit?
Exactly.
Because there was there
To
was
travel
really
out to
no.
I
Las
think
Vegas.
people just assume that no one wants to go to these games, and it's kind of ridiculous.
It is, yeah.
The disparity in the treatment of men's teams versus women's teams.
And yeah, we always see this kind of treatment, but I think this was just such an extreme case. The number 6 team in the nation.
Now
like
number 5.
Exactly. They travel all the way out there, and it's over Thanksgiving break. Like, they are taking their time to be there. And
Well, I think the important thing to note is that it got such large national attention, and I think that says something. And it partially is because of Terry Moren's quote that's kind of everywhere of her kind of disappointment with the situation. They were promised something and they didn't get it. And it's just disappointing for the women's game to have to go through this. And it came out that the guy who organized it was like an AAU guy, and I don't know how you get around these kind of situations, but it was definitely disappointing to see, a team as good as Indiana, and the other teams were good too, and they have to play in these conditions where I saw that a player got hurt and they couldn't get anyone over there for 40 minutes, which is just ridiculous.
That's what kind of does it for me.
Ridiculous.
And that's what
it's about
I
the
think
safety
Terry
of the
Moren
players.
was saying too, exactly. But you have to, that just shows so much respect, at least that I have for Terry Moren and this team. They still gave it their all. They were there to play, and that's what they did. And so let's talk a little bit about Friday. Someone was injured, but we had star player senior guard Grace Berger went down with a knee injury during the team's win. They ended up winning Saturday as well, and we saw players like Mackenzie Holmes and Yarden Goes On really step up in her absence. But assuming the worst, and if Grace is gone long term, what do you guys want to see from the team in order to take her place? She's such a big part of this Indiana team.
Well, I think the important thing to note, and Kevin, you mentioned it earlier, is that this team is really deep. It's a completely different team than it was last year. And I think they do have players that are able to step up, like you said, Gerzon. There are other players who are able to not take her role, and I'm not saying that at all, because when she steps on the court, she makes everyone a better player, and she makes them, look good and play well, and that's just what she does, and she has such a big impact on this team, and we haven't heard anything about a long-term injury, so I guess we're still waiting on that from her getting checked out by the medical staff here. But it would definitely be a huge blow to this team, although they do have the depth to hopefully survive it.
You're right. I think we could see a big difference this year in just the way that the team will handle those injuries and absences of bigger players. They have new players to step into, not necessarily the same role that Berger plays, but just different ways to cut up the slack.
I mean, so let's assume Grace is out for the entire year, because kind of from the, Talia, you mentioned it, we kind of still don't have an official
Yeah, they
word.
haven't really released anything.
I think they're still probably waiting
But we
on.
did say that, Terry Moren did say that she was concerned.
Yeah.
Which, so...
I was going to say,
Well,
from what we
concerning,
have heard,
Yeah.
it doesn't sound to be anywhere near,
Not
remotely good.
Yeah, we cannot assume that she will be back against Carolina.
Yes.
That is for sure. It doesn't.
Unfortunately.
So I think the way this team goes, assuming Grace is out for the majority of the year, if not the entire year, I think it's a more modern-looking team. I think it's a team that spreads the floor a little bit more. Obviously, Grace's main point of, offense is coming from that mid-range. But if, she's out, I think this team kind of goes a little bit more new school and tries to infuse a little bit more of that three-point shooting, something they couldn't do last year and something that they've been able to showcase a little bit this year because they have the pieces to do it. But now with Grace possibly being out, you kind of have to rely on Sarah Scalia, Sydney Parrish to kind of take on those roles and really push the three ball, something that, is kind of the rage in basketball nowadays.
I totally agree. They've got to, because Grace, she makes up for a lot of the points that Indiana scores, but if they can
I think she's the biggest key to this team's success, but I think, like you said, without her, they will have to utilize their three-point shooting a lot more, and I think Sydney Parrish is someone that'll definitely have to work on that a bit because she did come in, with the intention of being a shooter, and Sarah Scalia has done that as well, and she's done pretty well, but I was looking at Parrish's numbers, and they're not phenomenal, but I think she'll get there as she gets used to this team and coming off the bench.
And this is a new kind of position for her. Yeah, she's used to being the starting player, and now she comes in and she brings that new energy for the team, so hopefully she'll be able to step more into that role. Though. Yeah, now I assume she'll be starting a little bit more that if Grace is gone, so we'll have to see what she can do, but looking into the team's most recent wins in the Las Vegas Invitational, Auburn and Memphis, talk to me a little bit about what you guys saw from everybody else on the team during those two games.
I'll start with Auburn. I mean, pretty dominating win. I mean, Auburn kind of, near the bottom of the SEC. It was, it was a pretty fine game. I mean, Mackenzie dominated. Everybody dominated. It kind of seemed to be like what we thought. And then for the Memphis game, I actually was surprised because Memphis hung around for pretty much 3 quarters.
I think that was They
hung around for the majority of that game. And, it was a 15-point difference there at the final. But,
No, they were. It was
close.
They were in it. Yeah.
They were in it. Mackenzie, obviously, 27 points, doing her part.
And Yarden had, both incredible performances from them. But
yeah, like you said, Mackenzie Holmes did what she does, what you expect her to do. Like you said, these teams were not, they're not ranked teams by any means, but they're good. And like you said, Memphis kept up with them, and I think it goes to show, how important Grace Berger is because they were able to do that without her playing. But they did have Yarden Garzon step up. She was 4 of 7 from 3 in that first game against Auburn, so she looked good. But in both games, I do want to bring up, you mentioned this earlier, they really have to work on their offensive boards, on grabbing those. That's something that's not a desperate need, I would say, but definitely something that would make them more well-rounded.
No, I agree.
Memphis actually out-rebounded Indiana, 40-35.
Wow.
So, that kind of goes to show. And it's weird when you see, kind of just looking over at the box score, how everybody played. I mean, they out-rebounded them. For Indiana, the player with the most rebounds was Sydney Parrish. She had 7.
Yeah. And that's something Moren talks about.
No, not a bad number at all.
Yeah. If we are able to increase that rebound number, though, I really could help them out. So let's look ahead now to UNC this Thursday. Arguably the biggest game so far this season. What are you guys looking for to see from the team?
Yeah, so it's number 5 versus number 6. Indiana has the upper hand here. But UNC is on kind of a high. They just beat 2 ranked teams in Iowa State and Oregon. So they're looking good. I think, what IU has got to do here is stop Ava Hodgson from 3. They are doing so well. They're really aggressive offensively, and they're a really good fourth quarter team.
Yeah.
So the Hoosiers need to get ahead early. They need to maintain that, and I think we need to see, we mentioned this earlier, we need to see good three-point shooting because Grace Berger
especially.
is, pretty likely
she will not. Yes.
We're going to assume she will not be playing. But it'll definitely, like you said, be their toughest test of the season. Tennessee was tough, but I think this will be even harder without arguably
now that we've got
player.
further into the season, we're able to see the talent that these teams obviously have, but this will be a difficult game for them, Kevin.
I think, obviously, now with Grace being out, guard play is really going to be the main point in this game. UNC looked, that was a, good win over Iowa State. Iowa State, arguably the best team in the Big 12 this year. But, I'm just looking at the box score right now for UNC, and Deja Kelly had 29, Kennedy Todd Williams had 17, Alyssa Utsby, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, had 14. And do the math right there. That's a majority of their points. UNC scored 73 in the entire game. So guard play is going to be the main point of emphasis.
All right. So with all that being said, what are your guys' scoring predictions for the game on Thursday?
I've got it as a close game here. If Grace Berger was playing, I would have it probably less close, but Indiana's looking good. UNC is looking good. They both can get a lot of points on the board. I've got 87-83 Hoosiers.
I kind of agree with you. Both teams do a very good job of, scoring points. Indiana's been scoring near 80 points, if not
Right.
more, for the majority of their games. And the same thing can be said for UNC. I mean, they
I think
scored.
it's like
Yeah.
82 is like
Yeah.
their average.
Yeah,
or
both
something
very
like that.
high-scoring teams, for sure.
When it comes to those type of games in basketball, when both teams are very offensively driven, you can see things kind of wind down a little bit more. Just considering both teams, they're going to go out and shoot, and it's going to be a back and forth game. I think it's a game with a lot of momentum. So I'll put it around, let's say, Indiana, low 70s, 72, 71, and then North Carolina around 65, 68. It'll be a close
Yeah.
game.
I'm
It'll be a
thinking
close
something
game.
similar to that. Yeah, I would say 75 Indiana, 69 UNC. I think regardless, it's going to be a close game. I think we can all agree on that, but we will have to see. That is all the time we have today. Thank you guys so much for joining me. We will be back sometime after the game for Moren Madness. We will talk to you guys soon.